Congressman Butterfield, Chairman Butterfield, we want to thank the Congressional Black Caucus for being a collaborator on this initiative, and we look forward to working closely with you to advance this agenda. Thank you so much. And we're also joined by a wonderful leader, someone who actually bowled over our crowd last year, and we wanted to make sure that her voice was heard again this year because she is such a powerhouse. Dr. Judy Chu, also Congresswoman Judy Chu, represents California's 27th Congressional District, including Pasadena and West San Gabriel Valley. First elected in 2009, she holds the distinction of being the first Chinese-American woman to be elected to the U.S. Congress. She is a member of the House Judiciary Committee, and she sits on 2 of its subcommittees, Intellectual Property and the Internet and Crime, and then Terrorism and Homeland Security and Investigations. She also serves on the House Small Business Committee, where she is a ranking member on a subcommittee on economic growth, tax, and capital access, and is a member of its Contracting and Workforce and Investigations and Oversight. Now, I've got to say that she is also the chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. And so we are very pleased. Yes, you can clap to that. We are very pleased that she is here in her role as chairwoman of this esteemed caucus to share her perspective on the importance of closing the racial and ethnic wealth gap. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Dr. Judy Chu.
Well, thank you so much. It's so great to be here today, and especially, it's especially great to follow Congressmember Butterfield because he has been so terrific, and we like to work together as a tri-caucus. We like to make sure that we are moving forward together as a body because that's the way that we are going to close the Racial Wealth Gap Initiative. Anyway, thank you so much for putting this together. It's wonderful to be here, and I want to thank your fearless leader, Dr. Maya Rockeymoore, for hosting this event. By bringing together policy advocates, scholars, policymakers, practitioners, we can truly engage in the necessary discussions to address the racial and wealth inequalities. And I'm confident that with all the brilliant minds in this room, we can bring about the change that's needed to lift our communities. Well, as chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, closing the racial wealth gap has been a key priority for me. Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, or APIs, are often touted as the model minority, the stereotype that all APIs are well-educated and successful. This stereotype, however, is far from true. APIs are an incredibly diverse population comprised of over 45 different ethnicities that speak over 100 different languages. Despite these differences, people often see APIs as a monolithic group, and they don't realize that the success of some groups masks the struggles of others. This is especially true for the Pacific Islander community. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, Marshallese, Tongan, Samoan, and Palauan Americans have higher than average poverty rates and lower per capita income than any other racial group in the United States. In fact, over 70% of Marshallese Americans are low income and almost half live in poverty. But we would never know this without adequate data that is disaggregated. And thanks to reports from community organizations like National Capacity, we also know that APIs are one of the fastest growing poverty populations in the wake of the recession. These reports revealed that at the peak of the mortgage crisis, API home ownership rates dropped significantly, more than triple the rates of white counterparts. Unfortunately, these stories are often overlooked when people talk about communities of color, and much of this is due to the fact that we don't have the disaggregated data that's necessary to show the disparities that exist within the diverse API groups. And that's why we have pushed so hard for disaggregated data. We know that's the key to really seeing what the true picture is of the API community. And thank you for that that applause for disaggregated data. That is true. I mean, that will be, for us, certainly the key to addressing these issues. While there's still more work to do, we have made some important steps in getting the data that we need. For instance, CAPAC, our Congressional Asian Caucus, worked closely with the U.S. Department of Labor last year to release a report on the economic status of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the wake of the Great Recession. The report showed that APIs face the same socioeconomic barriers as other communities of color, including one of the highest rates of long-term unemployment of any racial group, second only to African Americans. Now, I wanted to talk about some of the Tri-Caucus initiatives that we've had, and that is CAPAC has worked with our colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus as a Tri-Caucus to do more to equip communities of color with the critical resources that they need to access wealth and credit. We know that the limited access to credit is a real barrier to home ownership for many families of color. Under our current credit model, over 50 million Americans are left out, leaving them unable to fully participate in the U.S. economy. A recent study showed that an estimated 9.5 million of these unscorable consumers are people of color and immigrants. And that is why members of the Tri-Caucus recently sent a letter to the Federal Housing Finance Agency Director, Mel Watt, urging government-sponsored enterprises like Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae to update their current FICO model and implement other credit scoring models that provide enhanced benefits to home buyers. And next month, CAPAC will be meeting with Secretary Castro of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to continue to push for policies along these lines that will expand access to credit for communities of color. Well, closing the racial wealth gap is just too big of an issue for one community to tackle alone, and that's why I believe so strongly that we have to work together to push issues that will impact our collective communities. You know, when I envision a future without the wealth gap, I see a table where everyone, regardless of their race or socioeconomic background, has a shot at the American dream. And I look forward to working with all of you to make sure that this is a reality and so that we close the racial wealth gap once and for all. Thank you so much.